18 years. That's how long September has meant one thing: a new iPhone at every price point. Whether you had $800 or $1,400, you walked into an Apple store that month and walked out with the latest device. That pattern, established in 2007, reinforced every single year since, might be about to end. According to multiple supply chain reports, Apple is planning something they've never done. Fall 2026, no standard iPhone. If you want the latest flagship, your entry point is $1,200. The $799 iPhone pushed to spring 2027. This isn't a scheduling adjustment. This is a fundamental reshaping of how Apple sells phones. And a recent product failure may have just validated the entire strategy. Let me back up. In September 2025, Apple launched the iPhone Air, their thinnest phone ever, the first major design shift since iPhone 1 in 2017. This was supposed to be Apple's design renaissance. Ultra thin, gorgeous, a statement piece. It flopped. Within 2 months, Foxconn dismantled all but 1.5 of its iPhone Air assembly lines. Luxshare stopped production entirely. The numbers were that bad. On paper, the failure made sense. $999 for one camera, a smaller battery, speakers that were fine. Meanwhile, the standard iPhone 17 at $799 offered 2 cameras, all-day battery life, and virtually no compromises. The Air was more expensive and less capable. But here's where it gets interesting. The people who actually used the Air, not the people reading spec sheets, but the people who lived with it, many of them loved it. Reviewers who spent more than a few days with the device consistently reported the same thing. It feels impossibly light. It disappears in your pocket. There's something about picking up a device that thin that just feels different, better. The compromises were real. Battery life was tight. The telephoto lens was missed. But the daily experience, surprisingly excellent. So the Air didn't fail because it was a bad phone. It failed because nobody bought it to discover that it was actually good. The iPhone Air failed at the point of sale, not the point of use. Apple was asking customers to pay a $200 premium for an experience they couldn't understand until they held it. And in a world where most phones are purchased through carrier websites or based on spec comparisons, that's an extraordinarily difficult proposition. For years, Apple trained customers that more cameras, bigger batteries, and pro features were what mattered. Every marketing campaign reinforced this. Then suddenly they released a phone that said, actually, maybe how a phone feels in your hand matters more. The messaging collision was real. Now, it's worth considering the counterweight here. Apple has always been a company that chases experience over specifications. The original iPhone had no copy-paste. The MacBook Air ditched every port. These decisions looked like compromises until they became standards. It's possible the Air was simply ahead of its time, a product that needed market education Apple didn't provide. But timing matters. And in 2025, the market wasn't ready to pay more for less, even if less was intentional. Here's where the timing becomes revealing. Apple was already planning to split their iPhone launch cycle for 2026. Pro models and the new Foldable in fall, base models in spring. From a manufacturing perspective, this makes obvious sense. Spread production capacity across 2 quarters, reduce the September crunch, optimize the increasingly complex supply chain. But the iPhone Air's failure accelerated something. Reports indicate Apple delayed the iPhone Air 2 to spring 2027 specifically to redesign it, adding a second camera, larger battery, vapor chamber cooling, making it a phone that looks competitive on paper, not just in hand. That delay fits perfectly into the already planned split strategy. One interpretation: Apple is admitting the lineup became too crowded. Too many models cannibalizing each other's sales. The Air was supposed to live between the base iPhone and Pro. Instead, it competed with both and lost to both. Splitting releases ensures each product gets its own moment. its own marketing window, its own quarter of revenue recognition. It's both a manufacturing optimization and a marketing discipline, but there's a risk here too. For almost 2 decades, September has been synonymous with new iPhone. Breaking that association means asking customers to relearn how they think about phone upgrades and giving competitors 6 months to capture anyone who doesn't want to wait. Which brings us to the Foldable. If reports are accurate, this is the product Apple is betting on to anchor the fall premium tier. A book-style foldable, roughly 5.5 inches closed, nearly 8 inches open, an iPad mini that folds in half and fits in your pocket. The hardware advantage is real because it runs iPad apps natively. Apple enters the foldable space with an app ecosystem no Android competitor can match. Day one, the software just works. That's not nothing. Then there's the hinge. Samsung showed off a creaseless foldable display at CES recently, then pulled it from the show floor. Reports suggest Apple is using that exact technology and that Apple refused to ship a foldable until they could make the crease genuinely invisible. Whatever the cost, if Apple opens this device and there's no visible crease, that's not just a feature, that's a moment. That's the kind of thing that sells a product by itself. But let's be clear about the challenge. Every leak puts pricing between $2,300 and $2,500. That's Mac Studio money. That's 2 iPhone 7s. For a first-generation product from a company that has never made a foldable, Samsung has had 7 generations to figure out why anyone needs a foldable. They still haven't fully answered that question for most consumers. Apple doesn't get credit for being first here. They're trying to get credit for being best. At $2,500, against a competitor that costs less and has half a decade of iterations, it's possible the foldable becomes what the Air was, a product that people who buy it absolutely love, but not enough people buy. Online discourse optimizes for specifications, camera megapixels, battery capacity, refresh rates, but most people don't optimize that way. Most people upgrade when their carrier deal is up, or when their screen cracks, or when the battery stops lasting a full day. They want a phone that works, takes decent photos, and doesn't confuse them. The idea of paying $2,500 for a folding screen, or even $1,200 for a Pro model when they've been buying the $800 version for years, might not land the way Apple expects. There's a version of this strategy that works beautifully. The fall becomes Apple's premium showcase. Pro models for power users, foldable for early adopters, willing to pay a premium for new technology. Spring becomes the mainstream refresh, the standard iPhone, a refined Air, the budget E model. 2 distinct audiences, 2 distinct marketing narratives, but there's also a version where people who wanted an affordable new iPhone in September just walk into a Samsung store instead, or pick up a Pixel. 6 months is a long time to wait when your phone just died and you need a replacement. Now there's another layer here that complicates everything. Siri has become an embarrassment. Apple Intelligence has been charitably underwhelming. The company famous for controlling every aspect of their ecosystem has been unable to crack AI on their own, bringing in Google Gemini to help. That's probably the right strategic call. But it's also an admission. Meanwhile, Samsung and Google have been shipping AI features that actually work for years. Apple is showing up to a $2,500 knife fight behind on the software that's supposed to make that hardware worth the premium. The foldable might be gorgeous, the build quality might be impeccable, but if the intelligent features that justify the price tag don't deliver, Apple's asking customers to pay a premium for hardware alone in a market where hardware has become commoditized. To be fair, Apple has historically excelled at integration, at making features work better by controlling the entire stack. It's possible their AI implementation, even delayed, ends up more refined than competitors, but that's a bet, not a guarantee what this means. The pattern here isn't about one product failing or one launch schedule changing. It's about Apple navigating a maturity problem. The smartphone market is saturated, meaningful innovation has become incremental. Apple's response, split launches, premium positioning, foldable experiments, suggests they're trying to restructure how they extract value from a customer base that upgrades less frequently and expects more each time. The iPhone Air's failure is instructive not because it proves Apple made a bad product, but because it reveals the gap between what Apple thinks matters and what customers are willing to pay for before they experience it. Fall 2026 might be the moment we find out whether Apple's strategic bets on foldables, on premium positioning, on breaking 18 years of customer expectations were prescient or premature. Because here's the thing about breaking patterns: sometimes you're ahead of where the market is going, and sometimes you're just breaking something that worked. If you're planning to upgrade this fall and don't want to spend pro money, clear your calendar for spring 2027, because for the first time in iPhone history, the phone you've been buying every year isn't coming when you think it is. Catch you next one. Peace out.